I had, but it's been resolved.
Excellent. Okay, goody goody. Where am I signing? Anybody know? I'll tell you what, I'll leave you to work it out and we'll come back to that. Declarations of interest, item 3. Anybody? No? Can't think of any. If there's anything pops up, then obviously people just raise your hand and we'll sort it at the time. It does happen from time to time. Public question time. I don't think we had any public questions, did we? No? Okay. You're very welcome, public, to ask us questions. Questions by members for the executive. Any takers for that one? Councillor White was in first, was she? Okay. Councillor White, please.
It's unusual. I'm usually on the back burner. Good evening. I happened to visit Camberley Town Centre today, which I do quite often, and to find that the main glass lift is out of order once again. I think this is the third time since just before Christmas. Can we have an idea of when this is going to be repaired this time, and are there means of it not happening as regularly as it does?
Thank you, Councillor White. Is this the one in the car park?
This is the one at Main Square.
By the
at the
car
bottom
park.
of the car park,
Okay.
the glass one.
Who'd like to take this one? Yes, off you go. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor White. Can I look into exact timescales for you and come back to you with a written response to this once I've got some solid answers for you?
Okay, not a problem. It's just that, you know, there are various comments from residents as you're trying to get up the other lifts, and especially with people with larger buggies. So
I'm aware. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the age of this equipment now, it's not as young as it once was. So there are obviously going to be more maintenance issues. But leave it with me. I'll come back to you in good time with a firm response on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a suspicion there's something in the CapEx plan around lifts in the car park. Are those different lifts? Anybody know? I think there's something in the CapEx plan around lifts. Yeah, so it may be that's part of that programme, Councillor White. But anyway, either way, we'll get back to you. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, a very close second as always.
Thank you. Would you like to join me in thanking the returning officer and their staff for conducting a free and fair election in their usual exemplary manner last Thursday to fill the vacancy in Windlesham Parish Council Bagshot Ward? Thank you.
Very happy to do that. Thank you very much to Mr. Stevens and Ms. Willis and the rest of the team. It was, we managed to encourage, I think, 23% of the population to turn out. So that was good to see, and good to see democracy and elections happening in Surrey Heath. And you weren't, I believe, second on that occasion. You were first. Congratulations to you, Mr. Wilson. I'm sure you'll serve the members, your residents appropriately in Bagshot. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just checking if you are aware that National Highways will be holding public exhibitions in Lightwater and Bagshot on the 20th and 21st of February to show plans for the new footbridge over the M3. That's the footbridge that this council was instrumental in expediting, and it will now be open about 6 months earlier than the original first estimates. Thank you.
I was aware, and yeah, it's great to see the progress there. We'll reunite Bagshot and Lightwater, which will be convenient for everybody concerned. I'd like to thank all those that have kept pressure on National Highways to expedite that project. And I think we can all just keep our fingers crossed for some good weather, which will allow the heavy lifts and everything else to happen that's required in April, albeit we'll suffer a little bit of pain as they close the motorway for the outage. But yeah, very much encourage residents of Lightwater, Bagshot and around adjoining areas that use that footbridge to come and see what's planned as part of their engagement programme with the caravan and people to talk about it that they'll have available. That's great. Thank you. Okay, no more? Gosh, we got off lightly today. Okay, we move on to item 6, revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy, which I'll hand over very, very shortly to Councillor McIntyre. Just one comment to make. There are a few versions of this in Modern Gov for the councillors. So if we are asking questions, can we try and orientate ourselves appropriately to help the portfolio holder and officers as appropriate? Over to you, Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you. Right, so time's come again to do the budget. Those people that were at PNF a week ago will have already had a chance to look at the numbers. And this will be presented at full council next week. So I'm not going to regurgitate all the numbers because I'm sure everyone's enjoyed reading the various reports. But just to remind everyone, obviously we've got 90,000 residents across our borough, covering quite a wide range of places and people. So town centre, we've got villages, large green spaces, and obviously smaller community hubs. We get these residents pay £10 million in tax each year, with only 11% of that staying within the borough to pay for services. And those services include our statutory services, such as bin collection, library provision, planning facilities, as well as discretionary services, such as car parks and retail. The borough also houses a number of businesses of varying sizes, which pay under £50 million in business rates each year, but of which we only retain 2.5% in the current year.
Economics, I love you.
Oh, did someone say they loved me? I just loved her. Oh. And obviously that is of the influence of the levelling up policy. Over the last 12 to 18 months, this executive has heard many requests come through for funding, whether that's in the form of petitions from residents with support from impassioned councillors, requests for a continuation of funding which residents have come to expect, and some new, really good ideas. The problem we have is that in Surrey Heath, our expenditure exceeds our income and will do so for the foreseeable future. When I first sat in this chamber, the narrative was quite simple. We need to reduce our costs, but don't panic. We have a large reserve balance to help us fund that whilst we make incremental changes. Except those reserves weren't accurately stated and the scale of change needed woefully underestimated. So here we are, 12 months on from our first budget, a confirmed view of the size of the problem and very little good news for our residents. With the arguments we've heard, such as our residents are used to it, I would agree. And as a resident, it would be nice to retain all the services that we have today and at the same gold standard. However, it would also be nice to win the lottery, something which a perceived to be affluent borough will never achieve through national funding mechanisms. But to continue as we are today means that we'll run out of usable reserves in the next 12 months. Our budget shows that we're running out of reserves in 18 months, the difference being the transformational changes which we're implementing now to give us some more time to be in control of our own borough before the commissioners do it for us. This budget, the MTFS and the annual plan, which we will see in the next agenda item, are quite dull to read, even for finance documents. There is little to get excited about. But the message is important. Inflationary pressures, sizable contractual negotiations to be finalised, interest rates which will continue to be higher than we're used to, alongside the ridiculous levels of debt we're funding, means that our costs will only increase. Our ability to generate income is limited, and we can never catch up. Hard decisions will need to be made over the coming weeks and months, but those decisions are designed to protect our residents' interests and place us in a good position no matter what comes out of the local government reorganisation. I'm asking the executive to support the papers today and to acknowledge that there is a lot of hard and emotional work to be undertaken by officers to get the council stable again, and we do appreciate the efforts that these officers are putting in to getting the transformation agenda delivered. Thank you also to the finance team for getting the papers delivered and all the hard work that everyone is doing to support councillors achieve what we need to achieve. Any questions?
Well, people are coming up with some, and I have seen Councillor Wilson's hand go up already. Maybe just to thank the Performance and Finance Committee for reviewing both this paper and the subsequent paper that's coming, and obviously the Chair, Councillor Garrett, leading that. I sometimes look at their agenda and think we get off lightly here. However, we do have 3 times as many meetings for different reasons, as you know. So it's maybe even Stevens in the end. But yeah, thanks ever so much to all of those involved. I think Councillor Wilson was first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try not to repeat anything I've said at previous meetings when we've been looking at this. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to the officers who've answered my questions already offline that I had noticed, so I won't bother repeating these points either. Yeah, you said there'll be hard decisions coming up, and we've only got a certain amount of time left, 12 to 18 months, if the transformation savings can be achieved. And I know you've had, as you said, you've had a lot of good ideas, as you put it so far, for saving and to last a bit longer. At the end of Audit Standards and Risk Committee last week, we talked about the rush purchases in 2016 of the mall and the House of Fraser building, where the council paid over the odds and acted unconstitutionally in the second one of these as well, spending £113 million, which was borrowed to buy these properties, which is the crux of the problem that we have now with, as you describe it, ridiculous debt levels. So I asked what the current value of these assets are, and it was about £20 million, so a £93 million loss. So I'm wondering, have you considered selling these properties? And because £20 million of cash would help the council last another couple of years. I know it's a big loss, but that money's gone now anyway. That £93 million of public money is gone. It's disappeared. Is it worth selling the properties, taking the 20 million cash, using that to last a bit longer, and ridding the council of this albatross around its neck? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We have had a number of conversations, well, more than conversations, some analysis of all of the property portfolio, whether it's retail or industrial, and gone through a line-by-line review as to the benefit or otherwise of retaining or selling all the property. We need to remember a few things. We still have the debt. So, okay, 20 million could pay off some of that debt, but we still have obviously quite a considerable amount which will need to be funded. Not all property is there simply to bring in income. It's also there to provide amenities, which we want to protect or need to protect. But equally, we have to offset that with cost of maintenance and sort of ongoing provision for that. So it is all being looked at. Property Regeneration Working Group is a very exciting monthly meeting where we discuss it and look at options. And Councillor Finan-Cook enjoys those particularly. So yes, considered, and we will continue to make decisions as and when the right decision or the time takes us to make the right decision.
So it's still a possible option?
Theoretically, everything's possible.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. Property that the council owns. Would we consider selling all the property the council owns? Because I know the previous administration bought lots of property. I know we highlight in the Chamber House of Fraser and the Square for obvious reasons, but the previous administration bought a lot of property, of which not all of it is losing money. So in view of the conversation that Councillor Wilson just said, what about trying to sell those that we own that aren't at a loss, or are they actually bringing us money in which we need?
Thank you for your question. The answer I just gave is exactly the same as I'd give now. So we have, as I say, been through line by line. That includes properties that are generating income versus ones that aren't. We've looked at asset values, we've looked at the state of the maintenance and ongoing. So we've looked at everything for every single property that the council owns and made some decisions. You'll see through the MTFS there are some properties that we will be looking to sell on for various different reasons, and there will be a continuous assessment of all the properties on an ongoing basis. So as and when the right opportunity arises or we feel that it is a good opportunity to sell, then we might, but equally there might be other reasons other than just financial reasons that we would continue to hold something.
If I could just add to that as the chair of the Regeneration Working Group. Yeah, there is an outstanding action, I think, on the officers within the property team and the finance team to align on a specific model for that analysis, both for the big chunky industrial commercial properties in particular, and to come back to us to give us an insight as to whether it is or isn't a sensible thing to do, property by property, and then as a portfolio as well, because there's lots of resources tied up with supporting the portfolio, as you know, Councillor Garrett. So I think in the case that Councillor Wilson made, I think it's very unlikely that that would make sense just because of the delta between what we spent on the properties and their value today. I don't think it would make sense, but I'm a simple non-finance person. Yes, Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you. So, which version am I using? Page 35, I think it's page, yeah. So, local government reorganisation. Now, when this came to PNF, obviously there hadn't been an announcement made by the government. Obviously that announcement has been made now. So, and I know other districts and boroughs have been squirreling away some money for reorganisation. Is that something we would look at adjusting within this budget, or are we happy to stay where we are and not put anything to one side?
So my view is that some of the work will be kept under transformation anyway. But equally, I think it's probably the same answer I gave at PNF. I still don't think we know enough to look to see what impact that would be or how much resource we need to put in. I think it'd be my preference with everything, whether it's capital, whether it's local government reorganisation, and all the things we don't really know today, is that we bring them forward as and when we know more and make a decision, or make sure it's transparently discussed so everyone's really clear on the numbers involved and the impact on the council. I do feel that you can put things into the MTFS with an approximate number, although I know that the finance team don't like approximate numbers, so maybe not quite so approximate, but then they can get hidden behind other things. And I think, given the state of the finances and how sensitive everything is, we need to make sure that we talk about things openly and transparently and then integrate them at the times that they become appropriate. So I imagine at PNF you're going to see quite a few different variations of this was the budget and here's a restated budget, etc.
I'm not going to do this multiple times. I apologise, Councillor McIntyre, but I think I am the one probably that's closest with Mr Stevens to local government review stuff, so apologies in advance. But we have had clarification from the powers that be that if we do spend resources associated with this, we can start putting it against the change and the business case. Now, at the moment, it probably is literally just time, primarily of the two of us, but there are obviously other officers in various discussions within their peer groups. As that ramps up a little bit, we'll have to take a more professional view of it. I understood that Surrey County Council may have squirreled away, I can't remember if it's 500,000 or 5 million, it begins with a 5 anyway, specifically around this. But then they're 90% of the spend within the county as a whole, so you can kind of do the maths and extrapolate down to what it might mean for us. It will be potentially more modest at the early stages, and then after that we'd have to see how things unfolded. But yeah, we'll keep a watching brief on it. I think there's a specific thing later on in the annual plan saying that we would revisit it 6 months through and have a kind of a bit of a tidy up and a clear out and probably add in as well. Sorry, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you. It's when everyone's been giving thanks, I would just like to give thanks to Councillor McIntyre and yourself, Leader, for the forensic work that you've done on the budget and driving this forward. As someone who is probably economically challenged when it comes to budgets, it's very thankful to have such experience driving this forward. So I just wanted to put on the record my thanks, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the executive's thanks for the portfolio holder and the Leader's work on the budget.
Very generous of you, Councillor Rice. Thank you. We'll take praise where it comes our way. It's a rare commodity. Nobody else. Okay. I have a few. Sorry. Probably. Mr. Watson, I think I sent a couple this morning. I was just wondering if we could cover off a few that is maybe as well. To inform the rest of the population as well. So on business rates, we took quite a haircut this year of 1.3 million against the expectation. And then next year, we're seeing that drop to about 900,000, whereas we're used to having about 2.5 million, roughly, keeping the math simple. Could you just give members and anybody listening in the general public a quick oversight as to what's gone on there? Because obviously we see, I think the year after next year, it comes back to 2.5 million. So what's the turbulence in the business rate system that's causing this, and how can we have more of our business rates retained in the borough?
So to answer the last question first, it's very debatable whether we'll get to be retain any more money from the government, but who knows with fairer funding. So a couple of points. The variation for 24-25, the current year we're in, was due to a deficit position being brought forward when we did the work around the collection fund and the business rates. Now that deficit has built up and fluctuated over a number of years and potentially runs back as far as COVID on the work we've done with the accounts and the closing. So that's why we've had to take a relative haircut on that one there. In 25-26, we've done a lot of work with engaged consultants called LG Futures, and when we completed our domestic rates return that we sent to the government at the end of last month, so 31st of January, it's due to an increase in expected appeals and challenges to rateable values. When they do a major reset of rateable values, it opens up the floor for a number of more appeals coming in from businesses around it, and therefore it affects the income we're coming through, because we've had to increase our appeals provision, which is why you had that one-off hit in 25-26.
I'm going to be slightly flippant here, but I assume we have a statutory duty to collect these things, do we? Because it's starting to become not really worth our while from the borough's point of view.
Yes, we do obviously have that, and we'll probably find a strong legal challenge from the other people who get more of the money, the government. Yeah. Thank you.
I think there's a few other points I sent you that I think maybe you and the team could come back to me separately on. The couple of points maybe in follow-up. Appendix 1.2 deals with, I think, all the capital, growth items. Have those already been assessed rigorously by officers for the potential to either capitalise them, should a case be able to be made, or for the use of SIL funds? Or is that work that could still happen?
So the current programme, we have worked with the SIL officer, and we believe there is potential some ability to use SIL money when we close down the accounts as part of the funding for the capital programme. We're working on there. In terms of the new capital bids, I think there's very small opportunity. I'm trying to find my notes here. Don't know where it is gone there. I did have it. Sorry, yes. So yeah, we're working on those ones there. There isn't a great deal that we can probably do this year, as in 25-26 programme, but certainly we're going to apply it. And I know you did ask about the reserves and what we're doing and can we simplify them. We have simplified them into the two pots at this point. It will then make sense that when we go to close down and do the outturn for the council, we then look at what those reserves do and where we go, so we get that balancing. It would be not pointless but nugatory work to possibly do that now, and then finally got to then withdraw and change them all around again at the outturn position. So certainly when we hit the outturn, we'll apply capital funding where we can from the reserves and obviously revenue funding, and then we'll come to a position where we can rationalise and be sensibly assured of what reserves we've got and what we'll use them for.
Thank you. So we might see that in April, May time when that gets looked at. I get that point. There's no point doing double work. And so what you're saying is on Appendix 1.2 there might be bits and pieces, but we shouldn't hold out too much hope. And then on Appendix 2-3, which I think is the growth items, CapEx items, thank you, CapEx bids. Have they been rigorously assessed for the potential to use SIL funds yet? And if not, when might that happen?
Again, same point, we are working with the SIL officer around it. It has been done, we just haven't managed to record it in time for this. As I say, it's better to apply the SIL at the end of the financial year, seeing what we've got, because although it is SIL money that's come in, it's capital funding and financing rather than budget to spend. So we set a capital programme based on what the council would like to do in terms of its capital works, and then we see if we can apply, first of all, government grant as a priority against it, then developers' contributions, then any receipts we have, and finally we may have to go into prudential borrowing to fund that capital programme.
Okay, so there might be some opportunities there. There might be. Okay. Did you want to come in?
Only Mr Rudd was just saying that the budget ones have been assessed for SIL funding, the potential to use SIL funding.
They have, and there is no potential, or
If they have been, then that's included. If not, so I think there was limited.
so there's no. We should assume no further upside. Upside being allocation of expenditure to SIL.
Yes.
Okay. We can have another go at that, around that loop another time. Final one, and then apologies to my colleagues, but I guess we all want to say yay at the right time. On the CapEx programme, which I am struggling to find with the three versions of control, apologies. Let me just quickly. Where is it a separate appendix document, or is it covered within the CapEx and investment strategy, the appendix 2-3?
It's a separate one It's a separate one on ModGov.
It's a separate one on ModGov, okay. That's what I did say I was going to have problems with this stuff today.
What particular part are you looking for?
Yeah, it must be right at the bottom of the, I think it's at the bottom of the CapEx strategy. 1 second. No, it's not there. Have you got the growth items? Sorry, this is why I tried. This is the problem with going digital, and then there being three versions of the digital. Yeah, it's not in that document. It's a separate table.
So then it's not in this.
It's not in there. Yes, Councillor Rice, please help me.
I have a question while you're looking. It's just on page 32, item 8.5 and 8.6, so 32 of the ModGov report. It's page 16 of 21 of the document. It has the property portfolio split out by commercial, office and retail and the net operating income. And then in 8.6 it talks about the deficit of income. And I'm just wondering, is that table the best way to present that information? Because it does present the information that the property is delivering a net operating income. However, as we know, the debt servicing actually kind of does counter out a lot of the income that we generate. So I'm just wondering, is it possible to kind of present that information in a different, in a way that kind of, it does show that there is the operating income, but also there is also then the indirect costs of the debt financing after it. I was wondering, is that a better way to look at that information?
From my point of view, that would be fine, but I don't know whether Mr Watson or Mr Watson wants to comment.
It can be changed. I think it's key to point out that although we did borrow the money to buy the assets, the debt is not directly linked to the asset through the accounting processes. So we all know what it was bought for and where we got the money from. But in terms of the accounting process, and we've tried this year to strip out to show where the debt financing is, so almost in a different position from the property portfolio. So part of the paragraph at 8.5 on that page 32 is showing that the property portfolio, and as part of the question that we asked and talked about earlier, is it does bring in income. It just doesn't cover the debt financing costs. But as we're showing them in a different place in the MTFP, we can reverse it back in again. It was traditionally shown in the service line within the net cost of services, which is where we got to the position where we were last year, that we weren't fully aware what was in net cost of services and why it was understated. So this time, this year, we've stripped it out and are dealing with debt financing separately from the property portfolio.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I think if we go up in the helicopter for a second, I think broadly speaking, we're losing about 4 million on the properties when we look at the debt interest MRP and the income, which I think is part of the background to Councillor Rice's question. And then we're left next year with about a 3 million structural deficit of our net income and expenditure for the core council operations. Is that roughly right, would you say?
On the spot here, yes, I'd say it's roughly right. We can do more detail, but it is, I think, in there. It's that whole, how we have to present things at times, yeah.
Thank you. So I found Appendix 2-3, which is the CapEx capital bids. I just want to check my understanding and to make sure that we've got this straight before it goes to full council, so I appreciate the patience of everybody. Item 1 says the site acquisition and development BFF London Road. If I'm reading this correctly, we're planning cumulatively roughly 2 million over the next couple of years for that activity. That is an historic provision, is that correct, to associated with the local plan and the development of the block as a whole? Is that roughly correct? I don't know if it's yourself or Mr. Reading on this one.
So, I'll go first, okay. We have some legacy budgets that we had has been in place for London Road Block for a number of years. Some of it was for doing the redevelopment, some of it is to do with the acquisition to try and make the site complete, to make it a more valuable asset to sell as a block. That was always the intention around it. Whereas previously we've taken out some of the legacy budgets because we know they weren't rolling forward and replaced them with more accurate budgets with London Road, there has always been the intention to continue doing the work, and certainly the success of receiving the bid to the brownfield redevelopment, landfill, whatever, grant we got coming in, allows us to carry on doing that. It's recognised, of course, that the money from the government is never enough to do what we want to do, as it was only to remove the asbestos from the old Alders building and knock down some buildings. Ideally, we want to do a bit more site clearance and certainly try and clear the Alders building at the same time. So that's why those budgets are remaining in there, and hopefully they will be the amount we've got. I think the current plan is to spend about 2.8 million on the works that the BLRF fund enables for us, of which the government obviously pays half of it, and the rest of it will then be used to continue with site acquisition and to make it more attractive to sell as a disposal asset. So that's why they're left in there and carried forward, rather than taking them out and putting a new bid in. We think there's sufficient budget in there to keep going.
Thank you. I think it may be connected, it may not be, with Councillor White's question, but under new bids, I think there's an amount of money there put aside for lifts in the car parks, so that could well be related to Councillor White's question, yeah, over the next couple of years. So there's a refurbishment programme there associated with the car parks, and I think there's some other works around car parks as well. Okay. Anything else on the medium-term financial strategy and budget at this stage from anybody? No? Good. Are we happy to propose that as recommended to Council? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you to all involved in that item. We move on to the annual plan. Please, Ms Bainbridge, if you want to step in at any point, please do so. Or Ms Kipping, I'm not sure who's handling it. But this one is under myself pulling it together. So the annual plan has been stripped back to the basics, which I think links quite nicely with Councillor McIntyre's statement around the budget. So the two documents should be viewed back to back. I think since it went to P&F, there have been a number of changes which are listed in the document based on their feedback and comments. I think potentially the additional change has been moving the targets where there are national targets to that level. So I think there have been a number moved since that date. Is that correct, Ms Bainbridge? Just double check. Yeah, I'm seeing a nod.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So a number of targets have moved to the national target level. There's a couple of changes that we'd like to discuss, but I think beyond that, but I think in the interest of time, I'll just open it straight out to questions, because I think many of you will have seen this at P&F anyway. Any questions from anybody? No. Okay. Yeah, Ms Bainbridge has flagged through the various officers that one of the targets has been moved from 5 days to 10 days, but actually the national target is 18 days. That's correct, isn't it, Ms Bainbridge?
It was it's the benefits processing, the target that relates to changes, and it's 16. The benefits
16.
managers advised following a conversation with the DWP.
So we would be moving it from 5 to 16. Do we stay consistent and we move it to the national target? And obviously, if the team's performing better than that, that's great for the residents. But if not, we're not performing. How do we feel about that, Executive?
Sorry, I'm just on the processing target. Is that the one that we've already moved from 5 to 10? So we are currently at 10, and the proposal is we will go to 16. The reason we moved from 5 to 10 is most of the cases we are now dealing with are incredibly complex and take more time. And I believe that hitting the national target is where we need to be. We should aspire to be better than that, because this is people in genuine hardship. So my view is we've gone one step. I think we should keep it at that and review it going forwards. So although it's not consistent with what we've said, I'm bidding for an inconsistency.
Executive, Councillor Garrett, please contribute to this, getting us out of this. Gorgon's not.
So I've just found it on the papers. So just following your logic, so it was 5 days. Lower is better, as it says here. It is now. It is currently 10 days, and we're looking to change it to what is the
16 is the national target level. So
Okay.
all the other ones have been moved to the national target level by
Okay.
default. This was an oddball because there's late information saying it isn't 10, it's 16, which is nobody's fault, it just happens in life.
So what is the DWP minimum is 10 days then? Because that's what this paper says.
No, the DWP minimum is 16 days.
So it is, that was
yeah.
okay.
That's the inconsistency that's been spotted.
Do we, at the moment, what are we actually doing?
Better than 5, I think. Yeah, better than 5.
Maybe
Councillor Wright.
maybe we should be better than national then.
Thank you. I do agree with the points made of, I think the decision to move to 10 was a correct decision. However, the reason that we moved to 10 was because it was the national guidance. So therefore, if the argument of the original moving to 10 was the national guidance, should it not be to 16 because that is the national guidance? I do have sympathy and I do agree with, I think we are much better than 16 days. I think we're much better than 5, but I think the original decision was to move it because of the national guidance, national minimum.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think anybody wants to see it go beyond where it needs to go. It's just where should we put the target? Councillor McIntyre.
I think the target should be based on what we think is feasible and what manpower we need to address it. So if we are exceeding, which we are, 5 days today, and having a target which is national, which would have no actual difference to the way we resource it, then I would be an advocate of keeping it at 5. So I don't see necessarily the point in lowering our target to 16 because it's national average, unless we understand the resourcing impact and what that's going to do to support our residents in a different way than just a timetable.
Okay, last contribution. Oh, sorry, then Councillor Garrett. I'll go first. So the objective of moving the targets to the national minimum is not that we aim for that standard. We want to aim for higher than that standard. But equally, we need to give ourselves maximum flexibility as we go through this transformation process. So I am inclined to agree with Councillor Rise that we just be consistent here and we move them all to the national targets. That gives the transformation programme a chance to balance what resources we have and where we direct them. And because protection of the vulnerable is one of our objectives, clearly where we have scope to do so, we're wanting to do that because we know this has a big impact on them, particularly around changes and stuff. So that would be my recommendation to my colleagues as we do make it consistent. And I just think that's probably the right thing to do. And that we see how that evolves through the transformation process. But Councillor Garrett, please.
I don't disagree with any of that because at the end of the day, it will come to P&F. I suppose the concern is, and I don't take this as a slight to the staff because I'm pretty sure that won't happen, but if you set the target high, that means, or low, depending which way you look at it, that will be somewhere there they could be heading because, oh, we've got 16 days. Now, I don't think for 1 minute that's going to be the case, but that is a danger of doing that. But at the end of the day, it will come to P&F. It will be discussed and the figures will be on here. If we start edging towards 16, it will obviously be scrutinised and be obviously fed back.
Thank you. So my recommendation is that we do move to 16 after that discussion on that particular item. Do we need to put it to a vote or can we nod our heads to that one? We're okay with that one. Okay. Okay, we're moving to 16. Right. So that's on that one. You get a second bite of the check. Councillor Cook, please.
I'm so sorry, Leader. I just wanted to put on record my discomfort with this proposal. I think if we are comfortably achieving processing times of less than 5 days, moving our target to 16 seems extreme. And 16 days is a very long time when you're waiting. So I just wanted to put on record that I have a significant sense of discomfort around the move into 16.
Noted. Councillor McIntyre.
Maybe the challenge we have is that we're not distinguishing between upper limits and targets. And I know we're talking about national average targets, but should national average not be our upper limit? And then we have a aspirational target internally, which would then go some way to alleviating the performance versus slip. And just to, I know Councillor Garrett asked at PNF for comparative data and trend analysis. So I think that will be even more important with this to come through.
So, noted. How about we do this? Because we shouldn't really try and solve this problem amongst the executive that don't work in this area. How about we're consistent, we move it to 16 because that's what we've done across all the other targets, okay? But we do ask the team just to reflect on whether there's intermediate target for, 80% of the cases that we can also track. Because I think then that picks up Councillor Ashbury's issue around the more complex issues where we don't want to see them go beyond 16. Please, Councillor.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back a little bit on what Councillor Finan-Cook said. Whilst on the simple cases, as you say, we are beating the 5 days comfortably, the request to move to 10 came from the service because of the problem with the complex cases we were having. So whilst on average we are hitting, there are individual cases that are taking longer. So I didn't want people to go away with the idea that we're comfortably hitting less than 5 on all cases and that just moving the target was arbitrary. There was a reason we debated in this chamber a few months ago to move to 10, and that's why we did it. I just wanted to just state that as a reason behind why we did it.
Mr. Watson, please. This is your area of expertise, so help us here.
Thank you very much. If I can just give the view from the team, because they have spoken to me at length. They're not happy potentially with us extending it because they're not going to do a slower service. They will work as fast as they can. The area that's causing us the problems is actually the new claims where you've got to get all the information in. They're the ones that are now more complex because DWP have taken all the easier ones. Changes is almost like a byproduct of what we do. And that's why we do get this processing within sort of 4 days. Because with a change, you don't normally need the same level of documentation that you do for a new claim coming in. So there's a pressure on the team around the new claims. In terms of changes, there's no particular reason why they still won't continue to hit the 4. I think there was a proposal to move it 10 as part of the acceptance. We are looking to create capacity, or if we can create capacity in the team to allow us to do that. But they have assured me that they aren't happy working to a lesser target than they currently achieve right now.
So what's your recommendation, Mr. Watson? Go on, help us here.
I think as Councillor McIntyre put forward, we have the acceptance and the tolerance that if we do go to 16, it's still within the target range, but maybe a interim target in there, so that's what we're aiming for. And as Councillor Garrett also mentioned, it will be monitored, and if it starts to drop towards 16, I'll be talking to the team first, or Mrs. Radford will be around that process to make sure we get there. But the 2 team managers are very keen to make sure we do hit that processing time as well as we can. I think it's just that safety net for the team, is that if we do lose staff leave and we don't replace them through natural wastage as part of transformation, then performance will obviously drop, and we've got that wriggle room from the 4 down to either the 10 or the 16, which way you want to go to. And even then at 16 and the 30 days, if we do breach those, DWP have got a lot more other authorities that are breaching them a lot more than we would do before they came knocking on our door. But that's when they would put a statutory intervention in theory.
Okay, I know when I've lost a ruck. We'll go with 10 then. Are we happy to go with 10, Executive? Nods there. Okay, we'll leave it at 10. Thank you for the discussion. Thank everybody for contribution there. Okay, there are 3 other amendments I think we need to consider. Please keep me straight here, Ms. Bainbridge, if I forget any. There was a number of discussions around what we should do with the country parks that are in need of attention, the parking arrangements. So I think, have we shared the amendment with the members in the room? Could you share it with the members in the room, and have we shared it with the members online? Thank you. I've got it here, so it's these guys I need to worry about. Yeah, so the first one is dealing with the country park. So the proposal here is to add into the annual plan a target for 25-26 that says bring forward for approval and execution a minimum viable proposal to make safe and suitable for sustained public use the resurfacing of the running surface and main car park to relevant standard, whilst also addressing main drainage and infrastructure issues at Frimley Lodge Park initially, followed by Lightwater Country Park once Frimley Lodge Park is underway. There are a number of dates there for approval at the Executive in April, procurement of works for Frimley by September, completion of works. I believe there's a proposal to change that to April 2026. And to confirm the timescales related to Lightwater by September, but that's contingent on discussions with partner organisations. First of all, is that clear? And secondly, any question? Please, Councillor Wright.
Just with regards to the milestones and targets, I do just want to just provide that we just ensure that we have the complete level of flexibility based just with regards to officer time resource, which is why I would recommend that we remain with the executive approval by May 2025 rather than April 2025. I think that was just mentioned. I do just want, it's just because, as I understand, there are holiday periods coming up, which not within April, but in this period, which would cause delay. So I had a conversation earlier today. We still want to aim for April, but it's just in case.
So Councillor Rise is proposing executive approval in May, and I think there was a proposal to change the completion of Frimley Lodge Park. I'm looking at my learned colleague here by April 2026.
That was in relation to the first timescale. So.
And the first one.
Councillor Rise's amendment.
You're fine with Councillor Matt, right? So, okay, so it's just the first one, executive approval to May 2025. Are we okay with that amendment to be processed offline by Ms Bainbridge and the document updated? Okay, thank you. Please, Councillor Garrett.
Press the right button. So, is this something that is in the budget for this year? I don't remember seeing it. So, and I'm not saying I've been through it as much as Councillor McIntyre has, but I don't remember seeing it. But I do notice procurement is not, or is not likely to happen until September and then completion till March. So it's actually in this year. So is that in the budget?
So you just preempted me for confirming, but my belief is, because we had this conversation last week, that this would be something that would, because of the proposal and the number isn't, so there are already some amounts in for some work to the country parks, but this is a new proposal, and therefore we would have to add it in once we understand what the numbers are and what that minimal viable proposal actually looks like. I stand to be corrected though, so I will double check with Mr Watson.
No, I think that's right. I think it's 100,000 in for pre-works, which will get through this phase, and then it would have to come back to an upgrade of the capital programme at that point, which might have to be, we'd have to think about the timing of that, wouldn't we? It would have to be after the executive meeting, I guess. Yeah. Good spot, Councillor Garrett. But we did go through that discussion, but we forgot to articulate it. Thank you. And the intention is to see if we can use SIL money for this, given it's for the benefit of the community as a whole. But that will have to be dealt with through a separate approval process.
I'm going to ask a random question now, but you mentioned SIL money, I didn't. With all the reorganisation that is currently going on, are we better off using all the SIL money we can use now, because we obviously are not going to be in a position to be using it in a couple of years' time?
Have you read the next item that's coming up, Councillor Garrett? Listen, we don't know, and therefore we're better to be in charge of our own destiny. So there will be money that continues to come in to set us through Section 106 agreements and through further SIL money that's allocated to us, and that's great. What we do know is the money that we've already got that relates to developments that have already happened. And therefore, I do think it's appropriate that we look at seeing how best can we use that for the benefit of the borough as a whole. So the next item says a target for 25-26 to generate options across the borough for a programme of infrastructure projects for approval to effectively spend existing unrestricted SIL and Section 106 funds to maximise the benefit for the community, especially to residents impacted by recent developments. So what that looks like, we don't know. What we do want is we want people to come forward with their creative ideas. Councillor Ashbury, you're not going to throw a bucket of water over this, are you?
All I'm going to point out is the fact that we talk about SIL reserves. It is not cash. It will entail borrowing. It will have a negative impact on our revenue position in year if we go and spend it. So whilst I understand the sentiment, I'm just warning the fact that our borrowing to fund these projects will have a negative impact on our in-year revenue.
But we don't pay MRP on it.
Again, we don't pay MRP on it, but it still costs money to spend it. It's not free money. I don't want anyone to go away thinking it is. We have to make cuts elsewhere if we spend it.
Agreed. So it's tepid bucket of water you've just thrown over it then, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Rise. All right, we'll let Councillor Garrett.
I need to understand that, because, so from my understanding of SIL money, and I've only been doing this a few years, I don't fully understand it. A developer gives us SIL money for stuff that they've done, and they give us that money. Yeah, but we're now saying that money, we haven't got it. It's being, so is it not ring fenced specifically for that? Is it going into the coffers and then used elsewhere?
I'll defer to the finance portfolio holder if I get it wrong, but my understanding is that is treated as a capital receipt when it comes in from developers. It is used to fund the council. It goes on the balance sheet as SIL money, but it is not held as cash, because again, to hold that amount of cash would not be prudent in terms of the rest of the money. So although it is there on the balance sheet, and I will defer to the expert, it's not there in cash, so we do have to borrow it, so we do have to pay the interest on it.
Yeah, so absolutely right. So, and listen, nothing that's going to come here we're just going to go crazy about. It has to be projects that are viable. But the thing is, rightly or wrongly, we've been sitting on this money and we haven't been having projects because we've been here for whatever it is, 18 months plus. I don't think we've had a decent sized project come forward. So all we're saying here, and it links to your question, is whilst it's still within our own control, and I'm sure there will be restrictions put in place as we head towards unitary, we are minded to get those ideas forward, to prioritise them as a council with officers' advice, and execute some of them in the interests of our residents, which have put us here in the first place. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, just to query that, why is SIL accounted for as capital unapplied grants and not usable reserves generally then?
I really wish we'd had this conversation before the Section 151 officer left. It would have been so much easier. Can I suggest that you write that question down rather than as... but Councillor McIntyre is going to have a go at it. Oh, we've got two want to have a go at it. Councillor Ashbury first. And then
Sorry, I'm just going to say my understanding of it, and again, I will defer to the experts. SIL is not an earmarked reserve. Earmarked reserves can be unearmarked and used elsewhere. SIL cannot, so it can't sit within the earmarked reserves. It has to go into the whatever the term is, unusable or unusable reserves, and that's why it doesn't sit as an earmarked reserve in its own right.
So
Sorry, I think the term is capital unapplied grants. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. So we can, yes, it does sit in a unusable reserve in the capital line. And my understanding is that that's because it's a statutory requirement, and therefore you can't then start applying it for other topics. So your sang funds example is earmarked, but it just, for public sector terminology, sits in a different line. So the capital amount that we're talking about doesn't sit within our reserves. So the benefit of using it is it doesn't then take away from the reserves that the usable and unusable reserves that you see in the MTFS.
Any further questions can await the finance training for members and officers later in the year that's on the annual plan. Councillor Rise.
Thank you. It's not actually a question about finance, so you can take a brief breather there. It's just in the wording, it says funds to maximise benefit community, and it feels like it's missing for the. So I just wanted to make that point. Just in the wording, it just needs to have something in there to actually make it make sense.
Very good. We're going to let Ms Bainbridge tidy this up afterwards, seeing it's a little bit on the hoof. But are we agreed in principle with the one that relates to the use of SIL, which is not a commitment to spend the money, it's a commitment to come forward with encouraged proposals that we then consider in due course. And that can apply to any ward and multiple wards. Agreed. Okay, so that one okay with, and the officers are okay with the proposed targets around that, etc. Yeah, good. Okay. So I think there's one left, bear with me. Oh yeah, one of mine again. With respect to CGR, there were two items in the annual plan which related to this topic. I'm proposing that we delete the second one and we amend the wording of the first one, which helps to dovetail with information we're starting to receive about what might happen and what might come from central government. So if you just hold on a second, I will find it. And I shall read it to you. No, I'm going stir crazy. Oh, it's on the other side of the document. Oh, I really am being spoon-fed today. Thank you so much. Right. Yeah. So 5.5 would go out, which relates to it relates to the same topic area, but we consolidate to one item, which would be 5.4, and I'll read it out for you. It says, prepare a report for council, setting out the process, timelines and resources required, as well as a proposed structure and delegation of duties for community consultation for the potential borough-wide coverage of town, parish, area councils to reflect the devolution white paper and incorporating any further government guidance whilst ensuring community engagement at a local level. And subject to council agreement, update the actions arising. So do the work, bring it to council. Once the council agrees it, then obviously we would look to execute the relevant amounts within what we can do. And the proposal there is September 2025, or within 3 months of the guidance publication date, whichever is the earlier. So are we okay with those amendments in principle? Mm-hmm. Councillor Wilson, please.
Does this amendment remove the aspiration to complete a community governance review for the whole borough in the next year?
No. It says that we want to try and wait and see what the government says first. And if the government doesn't say anything, then we'll bring forward a report to have a look at what we think the right answer is based on our existing powers and duties. If the government bring forward a paper, then we'll be mindful of that paper and then decide what we do. So it's trying to sit on both horses until we know whether it's just one horse or two horses we're backing. Okay. So thank you for your patience on that. It's good to try and get these things as right as possible. As we come to approve the resolution on this item, I would just like to suggest that we delegate to Ms Bainbridge to tidy up the wording and as required, if that's okay with everybody. Right, so are we approved with the resolution and that with those additional comments as made? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Okay, thank you. And are the officers okay with that? I've got to ask you lot first. Yeah, good, okay. Again, thank you, Ms Bainbridge, for your patience with that. And we leave it in your capable hands. If we now move on to the next item, local development scheme, which I think is a rest for me, and it's over to Councillor Ashbury.
Thank you very much. So local authorities are required to produce and keep up to date a local development scheme. Furthermore, the government requires us to publish a new local development scheme by the 6th of March, which is 12 weeks following the publication of the latest NPPF. Our current local plan was submitted for approval in December 2024 prior to the publication of the latest NPPF and will therefore be assessed under the previous published version and is expected to be adopted in autumn 2025. Given the latest changes to the NPPF, it will be necessary to start initial work on a review in autumn 2025, which is also the point of planned adoption of the local plan. We're still awaiting technical guidance for the new plan-making system to be published, and this isn't expected until summer or autumn 2025. The LDS details indicative plans for the preparation of a new local plan, starting scoping work in autumn 2025 after the adoption of our current local plan, and aiming for it to be completed within the 30-month timescale indicated in previous consultation guidance around the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. These indicative plans will obviously have to be revisited following publication of the necessary regulations and guidelines later this year. So 2 NPPF revisions in quick succession, together with uncertainty around local government reorganisation, leaves us in a fairly complicated position, particularly as our current local plan is in the examination stage. And so this local development scheme is the best indication we have at the moment of how plan preparation will be carried out over the coming years. I'll take any questions.
Councillor Wilson, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think even with hindsight, I think we would have wanted to do what we've done with the local plan and get it through as quickly as possible, because I was at the appeal hearing for the Grove End planning refusal, and a lot of weight was given to the fact that the planning policy documents that are currently adopted are out of date. So having an up-to-date local plan, even if it's for a previous NPPF, is definitely an advantage for the council. Yeah, something else that obviously makes a big difference to how planning applications are looked at, especially the one in the Greenbelt, was the 5-year housing land supply figure. And when we decided, the Planning Applications Committee rejected the Grove End application, the council had 7.24 years of housing land supply, comfortably exceeding 5 years. And then a few days before the first day of the hearing, the new NPPF came out with the new housing target, more than doubled. So the 5-year housing land supply figure was between 3 and 3.7 years. So I think going straight into review to try to get the 5-year housing land supply target up, even if it means more difficult decisions, that would give the council control again about more planning applications. So definitely in favour of that. Also, it was mentioned at the hearing that 5-year housing land supply is going to become a 6-year housing land supply target. Is that correct? And do you know when that's going to happen? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. I think you've summed up quite neatly where we are on our housing land supply under the new NPPF, with a more than doubling of the requirement that we have there. We are, obviously the team are currently working on the 5-year housing land supply to look at where we are with that, and we will, as I stated earlier, have to go into an immediate review once our current local plan is adopted in order to look at how we comply with the new NPPF. In terms of the 6-year housing land supply, that will come in for us in July, and the reason that is coming in is the government guidelines on a buffer. They require a 5-year supply plus an adequate buffer. That's currently 5%, but for boroughs where they have not demonstrated delivery against the new targets over the past 3 years, that goes to a 20% buffer that is needed. That's why I think you're referring to the 6 years. It's a 5-year housing land supply with a 20% buffer, and that will come in on the 1st of July this year. I will ask Ms Reeves on the screen to confirm that what I've said is accurate. I think that's exactly when it's coming in July.
It is absolutely coming in on the 1st of July. It's the 1st of July 2026 that's proposed to be introduced.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Garrett, please.
Just picking up on the housing supply, obviously we were in a training session which won't have been public knowledge at the time, and obviously the figures are here now, but it's quite concerning that we find ourselves in this position where basically we've got to find 10 years supply of housing in 5 years. That's how simple it is. that's going to be really difficult. And I think the biggest concern, which obviously not everybody will understand, is any applications to come now that we decide to not accept under the normal conditions could go to appeal and then could be passed. So unfortunately, not for any water. And I did ask the question of Mr. Chenier at the time, how are these figures figured out? And there's apparently a really complicated formula, which we're not going to go into now, but it is a little bit of a concern. I suppose it's a concern for the next 2 years. After that, it might be the unitary's concern, but it is a concern.
I agree with you. It's a concern. Whichever authority is having to deliver this housing, it's a concern. It's not something we can kind of sweep under the carpet and ignore despite the local government reorganisation. We will have to go back and review decisions that we have looked at in the past to look at that, because you're absolutely right. If we cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply with a buffer, then sustainable development is assumed, and we would lose every appeal that we refused permission. So it is important. It is something the team, I am well aware of, are working on at the moment from what I've seen. And again, it is something we will have to demonstrate once we get beyond the adoption of our current plan. But the adoption of the current plan, as Councillor Wilson said, does help because it updates all of our policies, some of which date back over 20 years.
Can I just ask a question, Councillor Ashby, if you don't mind? Because I'm struggling to follow some of this, to be honest. I don't know why. I just am struggling to follow some of this, and I've read it 4 times and I'm still struggling. So we're in the final closing straight for our existing plan, which we hope to get through to the finish line on. But that will be against the old numbers. Okay, but out of that may come a number of remedial actions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and those relate to specifically updating the 5-year land supply to the new number. Is that right?
That is my understanding. I look to Ms Reeves to nod on that.
So for current decision making for planning applications, we're required to have regard to the new number of 684 homes per year. But in terms of progressing the local plan through the examination process through to adoption, we have regard to the figure that's derived through the National Planning Policy Framework 2020-23, which is 321 homes a year. So at the point of adoption of our local plan, the 5-year housing land supply will relate to that adopted local plan requirement figure. So we will in effect regain a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption of the plan that's going through the examination at the moment.
Okay, so it's against the old number. Okay, it's against the old number. And then when you're talking about a local plan review, you're effectively talking about the new local plan process starting again, which is what's documented here.
Exactly, and that is the one which, under the guidelines on the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, has a target for 30 months, which is the timescale reflected in the document.
Okay, and in terms of how quickly do we have to start that process, that's the guidance we're still waiting on from the government, is that right? Which is why this is a notional timeline.
Broadly, that's correct.
And in terms of the funding for this, we have taken the view that it's not in next year's budget because most of the costs will start flowing into the subsequent year's budget. Is that correct?
The budgeted numbers reflect the money that was in the budget for the next financial year for 25-26 to take us to examination of the local plan, and then no further additional money beyond the cost of the team is currently built into the budget until subsequent years.
So it doesn't cover the scope of what's documented in here, does it? For the update of for the more detailed work in 26, 27, etc. It doesn't cover that work at the moment, the budget.
Not at the moment, not the detailed work beyond the next financial year.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, there's a lot of plans and reviews and things. Good. Anybody else? No. Okay, so are we happy to approve this as documented? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ashbury, and thank you, Ms Reeves. As a small adjacent item to that one, I will be writing to the MP just to flag up the fact that it's not obvious as an incentive for the development of brownfield land in the current frameworks, which obviously is meaningful for us sitting on some quite significant brownfield sites. Apart from making a target, there's no real incentive for developers to do anything with that land. And hope that you can raise it in the various places that it matters. Right, if we look at item 9, who's got this one? Oh, it's you again, Councillor Ashbury, isn't it?
Thank you. So, antisocial behaviour policy. The Council has a number of tools and powers to tackle antisocial behaviour, depending upon the type and severity of such issues. The purpose of this policy is to bring all the activities under one umbrella in a clear and transparent format. Whilst it's virtually impossible to detail every eventuality, this policy aims to set out how the community safety team will deal with issues where they have the power to act. This policy has overlaps with, but does not change, the duties and responsibilities of other partner agencies such as environmental health, housing associations and of course the police. And council officers will work in conjunction with these organisations where appropriate. I'll take any question.
Councillor Garrett, please.
Thank you. I fully understand. I have an issue with the relationship with the housing associations, which will probably come as no surprise to anybody in this chamber. I appreciate that the housing associations are responsible for the ASB within their property. But when certain housing authority organisations are not necessarily doing the best they possibly could for the residents, I have some pretty complex cases in my own ward right now. I do wonder if there's any, and I'm not going to go into the case obviously, is there any way that we can try and, I know it uses the words provide guidance. Can we strongly advise and help with guidance? Because I know the police are involved in some of these and I get that, but things are moving quite slowly and they are still residents, although they live in housing association houses. So they are still our residents and unfortunately they've been let down by housing associations.
I'll answer the first part of that in terms of the policy which we're bringing tonight. I will ask my colleague, Councillor Finan Cook, who deals with the housing associations, to follow up. But what we've said, that the policy will not cover everything and we can't detail every eventuality, which is why it's worded in such a way as we will provide guidance and assistance. But it is not the council's responsibility to manage or to deal with antisocial behaviour in housing association run properties. So I understand the point, but that's not what we're doing here with this policy. That is something to do with how we manage the relationship with the housing associations. So if I can pass over to my colleague to comment on that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury, and thank you, Councillor Garrett. I just wanted to offer some reassurance really regarding ASB and our largest social housing provider. I had a meeting with the Chief Executive on Friday afternoon, and we discussed this at length and the difficulties we have in dealing with ASB. And he has now asked for a review of policies around certain types of ASB. So I think the situation is set to improve given a little bit of time. So I hope that that's of some reassurance to you.
That is certainly some assurance, thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question for clarification? Everybody knows the answer. If a resident isn't getting satisfaction through the housing association, in dealing with ASB, am I right in thinking they go to the Ombudsperson as the next step?
They would need to make the complaint to the Housing Association first, follow their procedure, and then ultimately go to the Ombudsman, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in terms of what we can do as councillors, and also the officers can support as well, is to try and signpost people into the right process, and it might be some people will need help with to get into that process as well. So, and I just want to make it very clear that I'm sure all the councillors and officers would not in any way want to see any differentiation between residents within the borough. They are all residents. I don't care where they live, and what type of accommodation they live in. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I think this policy and dissolving antisocial behaviour generally is all about working with partners, the council working with partners and across the community safety spectrum. So I guess there's probably a question for the leader. Just for the benefit of members and members of the public watching, can you explain the work of this borough's community safety partnership, the Surrey Heath Partnership, and how it works, which partners come together in that, and because we saw this policy being drafted at the Surrey Heath Partnership, and the ability of the public to actually watch the next meeting, which I think is for the first time ever, maybe? Thank you.
I'm not sure why they've got that pleasure, to be honest. I'll have to research into the detail of that. But yes, I do know the next event, next meeting of the Surrey Heath Partnership is going to be televised, the wrong word, recorded and streamed, all apart from an exempt part, which I will touch on at a very high level. So thank you for raising the point. I think it gives an opportunity to thank, I can't say Jane's second name, I'm really sorry. Boycott. Also known as Jane to me, and Miss Greenfield as well, and Mr Darkins as well, who support the community, the Surrey Heath Partnership, and Democratic Services support as well from James. I can't think of his second name right now either. Help me. Hall. Yeah, Mr Hall. So as leader of the council, I get involved in all sorts of things. Some of it you see coming, some of it you don't. I didn't see this one coming. I've really enjoyed being part of the Surrey Heath Partnership. I think it's a great group of organisations that are coming together to try and help the community as a whole, community safety. There are statutory partners such as the Probation Service, Surrey County Council, Surrey Fire and Rescue, Surrey Police, ourselves. And then there are non-statutory members as well. So some of the key organisations being the Hope Hub, Citizens Advice Bureau, representatives of the church in Camberley, and the faith communities in Camberley. I probably missed one, the Housing Association that we just mentioned, and one or two others. And we have a very mixed agenda of things, some regular items such as a report back from the police commander, but we have a range of other things as well. So things, for example, like what would our approach be to upgrading the CCTV cameras in the town centre? There would be a point of discussion. How can we keep and monitor and provide triangulation on vulnerable people that need our support, etc. So I do think it's a valuable organisation. We're trying to do the best we can just to nudge things forward a little bit in different areas. So I'd like to thank all the members of the partnership for that. In terms of our statutory duties, we also unfortunately have some that are a bit on the darker side, which are we get to look at domestic fatalities, also known as DARDAs. Please don't ask me what the 5-letter acronym stands for, but it's where there are very, very sad set of circumstances. And we perform a review facilitated by Surrey County Council and professionals within that body, looking at between us, did we drop the ball? Could we have done better? Could we have prevented that death by interventions? Which is quite a humbling experience, but very valuable work, and I know everybody engages in it constructively. So we have, unfortunately, 2 of those ongoing at the moment, which again the statutory members support in our Part 2 meeting, the detail of which I won't go into. But we have an independent investigator that goes through all of that, works with the victims' families, and the statutory agencies to try and understand where could interventions have made a difference. And I think, again, as I commented at previous meetings, we only have to look across the border in Woking to see what happens when things don't quite go right. Yeah, it's a very empowering and a great group of people to be associated with, and thanks very much for the officers for their support in that regard, and yourself, Councillor Wilson, as well, who not only represents the chamber there, but he also represents us with the police as well. So it's a nice connection between the two organisations. The oversight of the OPPC, isn't it, that you're a part of? Oh, PCC, yeah, the officers of the Police Crime Commissioner, yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions on the ASB policy? Good. Okay, so thanks to the officers that prepared this. It pulls it all together quite nicely. Obviously, we don't want antisocial behaviour in the first place, but where it happens, we need to be flexible in our approach to support its resolution and make sure people get the support they need. Okay, so are we approving that recommendation? Thank you. Don't think I missed anybody on the cameras. Closure of Surrey Heath Sports Council. I think this must be with you, Councillor Rise, yeah?
It is, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to thank Officers First of Mrs Sally Kippin and Renee France for the work on this, as well as Morgan Brownlow for the considerable work of the community development team, the work that they do. Surrey Heath Sports Council was established in 2001 to provide support to the sports clubs and organisations of the borough. The support provided was mainly in the forms of advice and grants funded by Surrey Heath Borough Council, which included talented athlete grants and coach education grants. In January 2023, the previous council decided not to provide a grant to the Sports Council, as it had not paid out any grants to the sporting community in the preceding year. No further grants have been agreed by the Sports Council, and following consultation with the remaining members, a decision has been made to disband the Sports Council, and the paper before us outlines the plan to reallocate funds under the existing and successful join-in scheme to be administered by the Community Development Team. The Community Development Team have continued to nurture relationships with the sporting community in the borough, along with officers in the leisure team and those providing opportunities to be physically active, in particular with marginalised groups. The join-in scheme has so far provided assistance to almost 60 young people in form of small grants to support access to sports clubs and activities in the borough, including gymnastics, football and judo. Feedback from the families who have been supported indicates that 6 months after receiving the grant, the majority of young people are still engaged in and enjoying their new sport. It is the intention of the Community Development Team to agree, with oversight from myself, the portfolio holder, several outstanding talented athlete grants amounting to £1,000 if all approved, which have been submitted to the Sports Council over the past 18 months, and to use the remaining funds, approximately £2,000, to continue to provide small grants to sports clubs and individuals to access training or resources to develop their programmes. These grants will be provided to those who may be facing financial barriers to their development or who are from underrepresented groups. And I'd also just like to pay thanks to members of the Sports Council who I have consulted with, who made it clear to me that they were finding it very difficult to find members of the Sports Council, and as well as the council representatives over the years that have been involved in the Sports Council as well. The recommendation is as on all the paper as set out. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor Rice. Any questions for anybody? No? A quick one from me. Sorry, Councillor Rice. Keep you on your toes. In terms of the support for the joining in scheme, are we envisaging sort of similar limits around £250 or something for each applicant?
This essential reallocation of money would not change the current joining scheme at all, so it would continue as already is. So yes.
Yeah, I can't remember what the limits of that are, but I think it was fairly modest, wasn't it? It was for the membership fees and for
yes,
clothing and stuff. Yeah.
The grants available through the joining scheme are modest.
Right, great. And we continue to publicise those through social media at the right time of year when when it tends to be the start of the season, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to reassure, as set out, there are a number of grants that have been submitted that are still to be determined, which, as I said, amount to about £1,000, which would leave around about £2,000 of funding, which the Sports Council had in their bank account. I will just confirm to the executive that the Sports Council's bank account has already been closed down, so the money is already being held by the Borough Council and to be used if the recommendation is agreed to. That money, and as I said, so the focus of using that money will be to be focusing, as set out within the joining scheme, for people facing financial barriers to access to sport, as well as people from underrepresented groups as well.
Sounds good. Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Are we agreed with the resolution as documented? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rise. Right, we're near the beginning of the end. It's back to you again. Waste.
Me again, thank you, Leader. This is for the, just to make sure everyone's clear, the procurement and contract strategy for waste collection and street cleaning services. This report sets out the strategic options process for the re-procurement and contract strategy of Surrey Heath's waste collection and street cleaning services. I do wish to stress that this report is not setting out they're not setting out the service that the new contract will deliver, but the strategic direction for the procurement of the next contract. I would like to thank the hard work of officers including Kelly Goldsmith, Steve Reed and other officers in bringing this report forward. It has been an intricate process so far, and I'm sure it will continue to be so, but we are fortunate with the team in place. The existing contract we have for waste collection and street cleaning with Amy was entered into in 2017 with a 10-year contract shared with Woking Borough Council, Elmbridge Borough Council and Mole Valley District Council. This contract has been jointly managed and administered by Joint Waste Solutions, which Surrey Heath is the host authority of. However, they operate for all 4 authorities equally, and the other 3 authorities provide apportioned funding. As set out in the report, our current waste contract will come to the end of its time period on the 5th of June 2027. And while there is provision within the current contract that it could be extended for a further period of time, it is not expected that this option will be pursued. As members will be aware, there have been a number of disputes between the joint authorities and Amy, the contractor, which I cannot and will not detail in this meeting, but suffice to say the current market for waste contractors is not likely to see Amy remaining following the ending of their current contracts. Therefore, it has been imperative that early work begin at pace to establish the strategic options for how Surrey Heath's waste collection and street cleaning services will be delivered following the end of the current contract. Early on in the process, an informal board was established by the Joint Waste Services Collection Committee that was comprised of the 4 portfolio holders in each of the 4 authorities, as well as relevant senior officers and the team from JWS. This board was established to explore the variety of options and provide instructions for review. At the same time, approaches were made with other authorities outside of the joint authority to explore whether other councils would be interested in joining. It was hoped that through expansion of the membership of the joint authority, it would improve the attractiveness and viability of the service contract. As a result of that, the 4 authorities all expressed an interest in remaining within the joint arrangements. However, despite potentially fruitful conversations, no other Surrey Borough or District signalled their wish to join the joint authority. Therefore, the recommendation as it currently stands is to continue with the joint authority arrangement between the 4 councils. As set out in the report and the attached annex, the expert consultant Eunomia was tasked to provide market research and options for the future of the waste collection service. 3 options emerged early: re-procurement of a contract, establishment of a local authority trading company, or bringing the service back in-house. The analysis carried out by Eunomia set out a clear picture of the 3 options for the delivery of the waste collection service. The most favourable option, for a variety of reasons, including operational costs, capital costs, risk and others, was identified as re-procurement of a contract, followed closely by the LATCO option. The least favourable option was to bring the service back in-house. As a result of this analysis, and despite the potential higher rates of control the authorities would have with an in-house service, the risk and cost of that service was deemed to be too great, and that option was discounted. The option of a local authority trading company was explored favourably, and the ability to establish an organisation that would effectively be owned by the joint authorities but operate as a business was seen as a potential advantage. However, during the same period of consideration, the government announced its intention to pursue local government reorganisation. This highlighted significant potential problems into the future, as well as the eventual boundaries of new authorities, which are not likely. Which, while the eventual boundaries of new authorities are not, it is unlikely that the four current authorities will. It is unlikely that the four current authorities will all be in the same authority. Therefore, untangling a LATCO would prove very difficult. There were also other factors that would have front-loaded costs, which would have been very difficult to justify. Following this, I am recommending to the Executive that we proceed, as set out in the report, to re-procure a contract. As set out and in the annex, re-procuring provides the most favourable option, and we have received reassurances that as a joint authority, we will be an attractive option to the current market. It is important that we make the decision on the strategic option now, as the tendering process will need to commence by July 2025 in order for the process to be completed, assessed and then presented. Similar recommendations have either been agreed or going through the joint authorities to ensure that we all keep on the same timetable. I will also add that the local authority trading company option remains as a potential backup if we are unable to secure a new contract. The recommendation is set out on the order paper, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good. Any questions? And thank you for Mr. Reid for joining us. Please, Councillor Garrett.
As I'm the only one left. This probably won't come as a surprise. So, obviously, this was signed on the 17th of January, and not for the first time tonight, there's the unitary coming down the line. Is this something, and we don't know where we're going, I totally get that. Is this something we should be starting under? I know we need to start it because of the deadlines. I know there's a possibility that one of the options was we could extend it. Where we are right now, is that something we need to be doing? And secondly, do all the other four districts and boroughs still feel the same as they did before this announcement was made? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. I understand the point of the question that you're asking. It's actually a question that I've asked myself of what is the likelihood of the new authorities, how that will work, because as we can all imagine, it's going to involve bringing together a number of authorities which all have differing arrangements. However, we do need to move this forward, because even at the best case speed that I have seen from the government, the new authorities probably won't be done quickly, but also the ability to launch a brand new waste collection service under a new authority all at once, covering large areas, would be incredibly difficult. So the likelihood is that we would need to have an existing service management process in place to ensure that there is the continuation of the collecting bins, which residents would determine is very important. What is important with regards to local government reorganisation is what the new authorities will look like and how they will interact. And I suspect that there will be a lot of discussion within that process of how will services be delivered. And I would probably imagine there are a lot of other services which are much more difficult to tackle first. And just your second question was the three other authorities. In the most recent meeting that we had, all four authorities did reaffirm their commitment to the going forward. The spectre of reform, of reorganisation is there. However, that we're still committed to moving forward. I would say Mole Valley, in my assessment of Mole Valley, are the likelihood of not being in the authority with the other three. However, that will have to be addressed at a later date, if that answers your questions.
Yeah, I think it's feasible. It could be, the four authorities could be in three different unitaries. Quite feasible, which is not ideal, but I think there'll be other services that might end up operating that way. I mean, my take on your question is that if we were 9 months further down the line or 6 months further down the line, then there could have been an opportunity for more councils to join this contracting exercise. I think when we had the discussion, local government reorganisation really wasn't on the agenda, and so the burning platform to move towards this wasn't really in place, and the potential cost savings associated with it. So,
if I could just comment on that.
Yeah, please.
What I would say is, being the joint authority, I think does put us in a really kind of favourable position going into new unitary authorities, because we will already have a delivery mechanism for councils to join into us, as long as the new contractor would be in agreement. However, we only need to look at one of our bordering councils, which is Guildford. They run their waste collection service in-house. So what we will find is there is going to be a lot of friction with this service of how they all work together. I do agree with the leader. If local government reform had been on the agenda a year ago when we were having these conversations, we probably would see that more authorities would be in it with us now. I do believe we are always open to the other authorities who wish to join us, and I believe there have been conversations, informal conversations at the officer level of if there is a willingness to expand further, but no joy yet.
So maybe just a question then. So within the procurement exercise that we're planning by the group of 4, jointly, but as a group of 4, will we be keeping the option open for other organisations to join?
No. So when we go forward with the process of setting out what the service will be, it will be for what the 4 authorities will want. I think that essentially, I would say personally there would always be an option if someone wishes to join it, but contract depending. But I would say at a point we will have already set out the procurement for the 4 authorities, and it will be more likely that those authorities would have to agree to the contract that we have, rather than being in at the ground level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'll look to Mr. Reid to see if he's nodding or shaking his head vehemently, but you're right. We have opened the door for discussions with other authorities across Surrey to see if they wanted to join this as a wider approach to procurement. That was discounted, so we are working as a 4 and we'll progress on that basis. If at a later juncture there's an aspiration because of a contract termination for another authority that we may be in a unitary with to join the contract, that will have to be a discussion between the joint contract authorities, that other authority, and also the contractor, and it would be by mutual agreement.
Sorry, there's one thing I remembered I meant to add into my introduction. So it's for the reprocurement of waste collection services and street cleaning services. In the report, there is language which provides flexibility, essentially in line with other authorities, because there has of potential procuring the street cleaning services outside of the waste collection service. That's not something that I personally think we need to pursue, but we may find ourselves in a position where other authorities within the joint authorities have gone down a different route, so we just needed the flexibility on that as well.
I've got 2 quick ones if nobody else will go on. So when through the process ahead of us, will anything come back to this chamber related to this process that we're following? I couldn't exactly find that point. Is it are we effectively authorising the group of 4 and the relevant representatives to go all the way through and commit the council to the contract?
No. What in under recommendation 2, it is providing a delegated responsibility to essentially determine the service need, but the final agreement on any contract will have to come through executive and to full council.
That's what I thought. I just couldn't quite see it in the wording.
What is unlikely is there to be a back and forth of service detail to executive. That will be essentially determined by the Joint Waste Services Committee.
And final one from me is the complication now is, I think you said the contract finishes in June 2027. I think we're all under the impression that this new organisation to be decided, or organisations to be decided, will come live in May 2027, although it might have been in shadow operation for the year before. Has the group of four discussed how it's going to mitigate the risk of all of that?
I will ask Mr. Stevens to come in on this to provide more kind of technical. It has been local government reorganisation, and Mr. Reid as well, I do apologise. Local government reorganisation has been a topic of the discussions that we've been having recently, as you would imagine. My understanding is that, as I was detailing to Councillor Garrett earlier, is that there is a virtue of having the contract in place ready to go on June 27, primarily because it essentially already deals with an issue that the new authority will not have to deal with. What the new authority will have to deal with is how they then move forward with the variety of waste collection services across a new single authority, which will have combined multiple different arrangements. Because we could find ourselves, for example, Waverley Borough Council also has a contracted service, but a different contractor. So, as I was saying, Guildford has its in-house. So I think the benefit is that of having things established, so the new authority can then look to the next step rather than having to establish a new waste collection service itself.
I accept that. I'm just concerned about the transition between the old provider and the new provider at the same moment as everybody's, shuffling deck chairs.
I would say that is why we need to start now, and we need to do the procurement. We need to start the procurement process this year, so we then have next year, 2026, to be able to do the work. So it's essentially before we even get close to June 2027, we have everything in place, ready to go. Okay. Mr. Stevens or Mr. Reid, can you provide
just
further
seeing
details?
whether Mr. Reid wants to add anything.
Well, just good evening. Just a couple of quick things. I mean, firstly, it's not an unusual situation when a unitary authority is created out of a number of former districts and boroughs to have a range of what you might call legacy contracts. So the new organisation will take over the client role of looking after those, but it will continue to see out the existing contracts serving those particular areas. So I don't see. I think you're right to recognise the risk that could all happen at the same time, but the client function would be amalgamated within the new authority, and I think if that risk is recognised and managed, I think it's relatively low.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Listen, I think we should just recognise the absolutely huge amount of work that's gone into this, included by Councillor Rise in many meetings, one or two of which I've subbed for him, so I know that they're quite intense. A huge amount of work that's gone in, and also Mr. Stevens and other officers as well, Mr. Breeden as well. So there's a lot gone in here to try and get us to where we are today. Let's hope we get some attractive costs and service levels out of this process. But we'll have to wait and see for that for now. Okay, are we happy with the recommendation as documented? Agreed. Okay, thank you. So I think I get to read, thank you, Mr. Reid. I think I get to read the Riot Act now. Because we're on to item 12, on to item 12, but so we can hear item 13. So the Executive is advised that under Regulation 4 of the Local Authority Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the ground they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act as set out below. Item 11, Paragraph 3, information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Item 13, Paragraph 3, information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Are we so agreed?